If I told you I wanted to give you free money for the rest of your life, what would you say? For almost everyone watching this video, I'm sure the answer would be yes. So you might be happy to know that very soon, almost all of us might be getting a free payment from our government each month. A payment that may allow us to never work again, or maybe just not struggle as hard to make ends meet. But most people never consider the impact giving away all this free money will have on our planet. And here is the thing, nothing in this world is really free. Okay, so this video is going to be a little bit controversial. So for the sake of making this as complete of an argument as possible, I'm going to break this up into a few chunks. Firstly, I am going to explain what universal basic income is and why I think it will be possible that we might need this for our planet very shortly. And then I'm going to cover off the negative aspects of UBI and something that I think a lot of people don't consider when we hear of this topic. And I'm going to support the negative argument with something that I read from a credible source. That was one of the most terrifying things that I have read on the future of universal basic income, a future that might be just 8 years away or less. So there's a lot to cover off in this video, so let's get straight into it. A look into the future. Before I get into what universal basic income, or UBI, is, I'm going to talk about some of the massive changes we are going to be experiencing as humanity in the next coming years and decades. During our history so far, humanity has gone through 3 industrial revolutions. These were the times where technology advanced in a certain way that completely changed the way we did things around the world. One example is when we mastered steam power, and that was used for machinery and in transport. Another is when we could more easily create massive amounts of energy via things like gas, coal, electricity. Basically, you can think of these revolutions as points in history where humanity took a huge step up in terms of technology and our capabilities as a species. But what you might not realize is that a few key figures on the world stage are predicting we're at the entry point to the next massive step in human evolution. The next phase in humanity's advancements is being called the 4th Industrial Revolution, and this very unimaginative name is being coined by this guy. That's Klaus Schwab, and if there was ever a person I would nominate to be a real-life James Bond villain, it would most likely be him. Mr. Schwab is the founder of the World Economic Forum, which I'm sure you are familiar with. However, what is it that Mr. Schwab is predicting for the next phase of humanity that we're entering into? Simply put, the 4th Industrial Revolution will be all about data, automation, and the interconnectivity of the human race. It talks about things in our lives becoming more interconnected, where all our devices constantly share information between themselves. It theorizes a huge amount of robotics making its way into our society, where machines will take over a lot of the jobs once done by us, fleshy meatbags. And it even predicts the rise of artificial intelligence, where computer systems may start making many of the decisions for us, instead of us being the masters of our own fate. Some of this stuff sounds a little bit far-fetched and as if it's coming from a sci-fi movie, but we don't actually have to look very far in order to see the evidence of this already playing out in our world today. Supermarkets and other stores are increasingly becoming automated, with self-checkout booths becoming normal all around the world. In countries like Estonia, robots are already replacing delivery drivers for online food orders. Within a decade, most of our taxis, trucks, and even airliners will be piloted by automated systems that can do the job safer than any human ever could. And in only a couple of years, you'll be able to buy your very own service robot from Tesla that will help you do the chores around the house. Now, at first glance, a lot of this stuff sounds amazing. We are going to have safer and easier lives. Awesome. But this also seems to come with one massive problem for humanity, and that is that most of the world will become useless to the economy with no way of actually earning a living for themselves. As more and more of our jobs are automated over time, more and more people will be made redundant. According to statistics, around 800 million people, or 20% of the workforce, will be made obsolete in the next 8 years. By 2050, less than 30 years from now, it's estimated that half of all jobs currently done by humans will no longer exist. If that happens, it would mean up to 4 billion people will be left completely unemployed with no way to feed themselves. Some new jobs will be created, of course, in new industries that will emerge in the near future, but according to data, jobs will be destroyed at a much faster rate. think of it this way. In around 8 years, 1 in 5 people watching here will not be employed, and by the year 2050, that will be half of people watching. Simply put, if we allow half of the world's workforce to become obsolete, this will have devastating effects on the world's economy. But luckily for us, we have a whole bunch of very rich and powerful people at the top that have found a solution for us: universal basic income. The solution proposed is universal basic income, otherwise known as UBI, and at first glance, this sounds amazing. UBI would be a guaranteed minimum income that every adult citizen would receive. You, I, and every other working age person in your country would get a regular payment from our government similar to receiving a welfare check. It would be enough to cover your most basic living expenses like rent, food and electricity. For example, maybe it's 1,000 euros per month in Germany, which isn't a lot of money in that country, but just enough to live on. And this easy monthly payment would come directly from our government with no strings attached. Basically, in order to stop the world's economy completely collapsing, you would receive money every month from the government in order to support yourself. And if you chose to do so, you could also have a job on the side. You could supplement your UBI payments. So unlike welfare, you wouldn't have your UBI removed from you if you chose to get an extra job, for example. Basically, the plan would be there to ensure that everybody has this base income that would allow them to survive in this newly automated world. And as I said at the beginning of the video, I honestly think that most people, if they heard of UBI or this kind of a payment, would absolutely put their hand up and want this money. And you are not alone. There are so many people that are vouching for this UBI to be rolled out as soon as possible. People like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and even Pope Francis of the Catholic Church are all supporters of universal basic income. And of course, so is the World Economic Forum leader, Klaus Schwab. In certain places around the world, there have already been some successful trials of UBI in places like Finland, Japan, and Kenya, trials that included thousands of people receiving a minimum monthly payment. Those who took part in the trial said that they felt generally less stressed and happier overall, as the monthly UBI payments took away their worries of meeting their basic needs. At this point, things sound pretty good. There isn't much to argue with. People would be less stressed, happier, they would have their basic needs covered, which is a human right, and it would be paid for by the richest people and companies in the world and would be handed to you by governments. And if that was it, maybe I'd be in full support of this concept as well. However, there seems to be a little bit of a dark secret lurking just underneath the surface of the current version of UBI. Just quickly before we get any further, if you are finding this information really interesting, please consider subscribing and sharing this information. And we also have this epic newsletter that people totally rave about. So if you want to find out what that is all about, there is a link in bio. Why I'm thinking twice. So I've been trying to figure out how to illustrate my concerns around UBI, but I figured that instead of sharing my own thoughts, I would share with you a credible source that is sharing information about the type of vision people at the top have for us. So I'm going to start referencing an article that was written in Forbes by a contributor from the WEF, the World Economic Forum, the same WEF that is run by this guy who is a huge supporter of UBI. The article is titled, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better." And it is written from the point of view of someone living in the futuristic global society, a society that the WEF thinks should exist less than a decade from now. I'm not going to read the whole article for you. There is a link in bio if you want to read that for yourself. I am going to focus on just one tiny paragraph from this that I think needs a little bit of attention. Once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact that I have no real privacy, nowhere I can go and not be registered. I know that somewhere, everything I do, think, and dream of is being recorded. I just hope nobody will use it against me. I'm not sure how to say this in any other way, but this is pretty terrifying to me. Again, I want to make it clear that this is an actual article that is written in a credible source by a contributor of the WEF, and furthermore, the level of control they are wanting to have in this new reality. A world where we are all living in a centralized, heavily controlled society, where everything we do is logged, tracked, and recorded. A planet where we can't go anywhere, or do anything, or mix with the people that we want to be mixing with without the permission of our government, the very same government that will also be in control of giving us the free money we'll need to survive. And this is the crux of where I have a huge issue with the current version of UBI, and that comes down to one simple word: control. Throughout history, our governments, whenever they've had the opportunity to have a little bit of extra control over the people, they definitely take it. For example, think of the temporary restrictions that were implemented on the global aviation industry after the attacks of 9/11 happened. Over 20 years later, those temporary restrictions are still here. So if our government is responsible and in control of providing us with this free money, they are also in control of taking that money away from us. And they could potentially attach any strings to you receiving or not receiving your monthly UBI payment. They could ask you to vote in a certain way. They could take away certain foods that you're not able to purchase. They would allow you to only buy pre-approved things. They could potentially, maybe, even tell you what you can and cannot say. Now, if you refuse or you break any of the rules, they could potentially take away some portion or all of your UBI payments. And this type of control would mean that a lot of people would have to sacrifice their morals and beliefs just in order to survive. And if you don't think that these type of restrictions could happen in the world in the future, I would say think again, because we are already seeing evidence of this type of behavior around the world. In Australia, some people on welfare have to use cashless debit cards, which only allows them to spend their monthly welfare payments on certain items the government allows them to buy. In China, citizens can already lose their rights to buy plane and train tickets, get access to bank loans, and even have their passports cancelled just for saying negative things about the government. And only a couple of days ago, the Canadian government began freezing the bank accounts of protesters who they deem to be a nuisance. So already we have so much evidence around the world of governments restricting people's ability to engage with the free economy just for saying the wrong thing on the internet. Now, I'm not saying I'm an economist and that I have all the answers. This is just one view of things, and that's why I need you guys to engage, and let's talk about it in the comments below. If the vast majority of humanity becomes unemployed in the next few decades, maybe UBI will be the only solution to the problem. Maybe it will be our only choice. Or maybe there are other solutions, like people that don't want to be part of the system, learning to take care of themselves and living in small, self-sustainable communities that don't need the government's support. Whatever happens, one thing is almost certain in this fourth industrial revolution, the way that some people would like it to play out, and that is that they will have more control than ever before in history. Here's the question: do we trust our governments to do the right thing with this new level of power and control they would have over us? I think for myself, the answer would be no. However, if this is the type of world that we are moving towards, it is important to consider what it is that we're trading in return. Money for freedom and personal sovereignty. I know what kind of world I would want my children to grow up in. Maybe there's other solutions that we're not looking at, and maybe this isn't the only way. And I'd love to know your thoughts. What kind of a future can we create? This is where the brainstorming can happen and different solutions can come to light. There's always going to be pockets of people breaking out and creating new systems that might be better for humanity and for our advancements, instead of just leaving our future to people that might not have the best intentions at mind for us. Also, if you find this video interesting and you think you want to share it around so more people have this discussion, please send it to them. And also like and subscribe. There's also an amazing newsletter that I talked about earlier, link in bio. And finally, we have an amazing private membership of people interested in finance and freedom. So if you want to find out more, there is a link in the bio, and I will see you in the next one.